In addition to the handouts, Bibles will be essential today. So, Jonah and Anders, could you hand out Bibles to anybody that needs them? Thank you. Time flies. I didn't get a bathroom break, but I think I'll be okay. Okay, Jonah and Anders are walking down the rows with Bibles. So if you need a Bible, raise your hand and they'll make sure you get one. Everybody's all set already? Okay. Welcome, everyone. For the next few months, we're going to be studying the books of Judges and Ruth. Obviously, more time on Judges than on Ruth because it's quite a bit longer. But they both take place during the same era. I get to have the fun today of kind of setting the stage and the context for the book today and doing an overview of it. Lots of kind of famous stories from the book of Judges. Samson is in Judges, Deborah is in Judges, and it has tremendous storytelling in it. It's a fun book because of the clever way in which the stories are presented, but it's great storytelling of a very dark time in Israel's history. In Judges, it starts bad and it goes worse. Maybe that's another part of the reason why the stories are well known, is that they're full of violence and mayhem. One of the things that we'll talk about as we go through is in these dark times when people continually turn against God, how God's grace is still present and at work for his people during it. If I were to compare the time of the Judges to a time in the United States history, I'd go like the settling of the West. So Judges is kind of Wild West. There's this migration westward in our history, and people moved out there before a proper governance and policing structure could be set up. So it was kind of might makes right. Kind of a lot of chaos. People do what they want. Also, in that migration westward, there were already people living there, and that created for a fair amount of conflict and bloodshed as well. You see both those things at work in Judges. I believe the last time that we spent any time with this book as a congregation was like 2020. We did a year-long Bible class called Connecting the Dots, and we really just went to get through every book of the Bible. So we spent like one Sunday on the book of Judges. And I'm going to use a little bit of that material for our class today because it's setting the stage for the book. I'd like to start here. We use this in our Connecting the Dots class. We tried to boil down each book to a single sentence, and here's what we used for Judges. After Joshua's death, Israel falls into a downward spiral of rebellion, oppression, deliverance, and rest. We'll look at this. We'll look at this diagram a little bit further into today's lesson. This is a pretty good outline of the book that you can follow along. Not like a conventional outline with number 1, 2, 3, and A, B, and C. But it shows this downward spiral, and it'll tell you the judge that was active at that time, and the enemy oppressor, and then a few other things that we'll talk about. By the way, I'm really excited about my handouts today. So we had our own printer before, and it was a color printer. The maintenance though and the toner costs for it were just kind of through the roof. So Pastor Lindemann found that it was actually cheaper to lease a copier and have a service agreement that includes like toner for a cheaper price. And along with that, so I think, what do we get, like 400 color copies a month? So I'm like, if it has color, it counts as a copy, so might as well put a lot of color on it. So anyway, kind of half sheet size maps. Talk about these in a little bit. Part of the reason for making them small is so that I could squeeze 2 from a page and not go over our limit. Another part of the reason is I think that it should fit in most Bibles. So as we work our way through this over the next few months, if you use it as a bookmark, or maybe put it in the last page of your Bible, then you have a map that you can refer to. There's a lot of place names in Judges, and I think one of the most frustrating things about reading is when you're told about places and you have no idea where they are. Not every place is on this map, but I think that this will be helpful and informative as you read through it. The other one, if this fits in your Bible too, that'd be great. This would be the second one I'd put in. If you only had room for one, I'd do the other one. But this has the outline of the book, and then it has approximate dates for when things are happening on the other side. If you just read through Judges, you get to the end of the book. The very last verse is, "In those days Israel had no king, everyone did as he saw fit." And you see that chaos has resulted from this. And it looks like there are no believers left. But then you go to the book of Ruth, and I think I have Ruth single sentence summary on here too. The first line of the book of Ruth is something like, "During the time of the judges," and it goes on to tell this story about a family that was faithful to God, and that moved out of the country and moved back, and they found more people that were faithful to God. It's good to keep these 2 books together. Judges shows us the apostasy, and then Ruth shows us the remnant. So during the time of the Judges, another well-known story, a foreign widow finds love and faithfulness in Bethlehem and becomes an ancestor of King David and King Jesus. So Ruth and Naomi, her mother-in-law, and Boaz, those are all history lessons that make it into most Sunday school curriculum as well. To use God's single sentence summary of the book, so we had mine up there before, there's this sentence that's repeated 4 times in the book. "In those days Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit." I think that there's some double entendre that's intended there. The time of the Judges falls, it starts right after the conquest of the Promised Land. So the Israelites come out of Egypt. They wander in the wilderness. They enter the Promised Land. And God has kept the promise that he made to Abraham some 500 years earlier, that your ancestors will inherit this land. That's when it starts. At the end of the book comes the time when the Israelites get a king. So they didn't really have a central government up until this time. So Israel had no king. They had nobody sitting on the throne of Israel. It was kind of a loose confederation of tribes, if that. But there's another sense in which they didn't have a king. They didn't have a king up there. They had become godless. And therefore, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And we'll see in Judges where that will take a person and where that will bring a nation. It gets really bad. So twice we have the statement, this full statement, and then 2 other times we have just, it says, in those days Israel had no king. But the author of Judges, maybe it was Samuel, certainly saw that as a key, as a key statement of that describes the times. Okay, for setting the stage for the book, I'd like to spend some time first with chronological context, and then geographical context, and then 3 Canaanite prohibitions that God had repeated again and again to the Israelites before they entered the Promised Land, in which they proceed to ignore and defy as soon as they enter it. So, chronological context. We'll start with books of the Bible. Here we have the first, if I hit the arrow, we'll have the first 8 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Joshua, Judges, Ruth. Here they are put on a timeline. One thing that I think becomes striking when you do this is that not every book of the Bible covers the same amount of time. So if this were just like a regular history book, you might expect that the chapters of that book would be kind of evenly divided according to how much time has passed. Not like that with the Bible. So with Genesis, we're talking about very approximate dates until we get up to 2000 BC. So if we put creation about 6000 BC, Genesis starts there. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then it ends into the second millennium BC. Can we just come up kind of together with some of the characters and the events that are in the book of Genesis? Some of the things that happen. I gave you creation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So you can't take that one. But any other people? Okay, Noah and the flood is Genesis 6, 7, 8, 9. Tower of Babel is Genesis 11. So you're going in order.
Abraham.
Okay, Abraham is a big player from chapter 12 through 25. You're still going in order. Isaac. So Abraham and Sarah have Isaac, and Isaac has Jacob. And Jacob has how many sons?
12. 14.
14-ish? Okay. I think I know you said that. Let's come back to we'll come back to that when we talk about the division of the land. It would probably be unfair for me to ask you if you can name all the sons of Jacob, right?
Technicolor Dreamcoat, obviously.
Yeah, I got to think through Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. One of them was Joseph, yeah. Okay, we'll do that a little bit later. You want to do it?
Sure.
Okay. Now the hard thing is if you don't do it in order, I'm going to have a hard time tracking. So try to do them in order of their birth. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad,
Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph.
Okay. Very good. And one girl? Oh, Dinah. Okay. Very good. So that will be helpful because we're going to talk about how God divided up the Promised Land in a little bit. Okay, good. So we have any other kind of big people or events in the book of Genesis we can think of? Moses comes at the beginning of Exodus. A lot of time is spent on Joseph. Joseph in Egypt. The book of Genesis ends with Joseph going from being a slave and a prisoner in Egypt to rising up to being second in command in Egypt. And then he invites his whole family, the Israelites, the children of Jacob, the children of Israel, to come to Egypt under, in friendly terms. There was a famine in Canaan, and everyone's together there. Okay, so that's Genesis. Can we recount some things from Exodus? You want to start? Okay, Moses. Moses and the Exodus. Anything else?
Something about 40 years.
40 years. Is it 40 years of wandering the wilderness in Exodus? Or does that come later?
I don't know.
That-
Numbers and
That comes less. It comes a little bit later. There's a big event after the Israelites leave Egypt. God takes them on a detour before they go to the Promised Land, and gives them these two, the Ten Commandments. Yeah, he takes them to Mount Sinai, and they get the Ten Commandments there. The second half of the book of Exodus follows that, and a lot of that is about the building of the tabernacle, the portable temple. But Exodus ends at Mount Sinai. Leviticus doesn't have too much narrative in it. That gives them their ceremonial laws of how they are to worship God, what kind of sacrifices, and when, and things like that. Numbers takes us from Mount Sinai and takes us through the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness and then to the edge of the Promised Land. Deuteronomy is a long speech that Moses gives to the Israelites right before they enter the Promised Land. So, Exodus takes up a fair amount of time because it kind of technically covers the hundreds of years of slavery, but most of it is like an 80-year period of time. Exodus and Numbers is just a sliver. Deuteronomy and Joshua also a sliver. Deuteronomy is, basically one speech. Joshua recounts for us Israel's entry into the Promised Land and their conquest of the land. That's what Joshua's time of leadership was. He took over after Moses and led the Israelites in the conquest of the land. Because like when we settled the West, there were already people there, and there were atrocities committed when the West was settled. It was different when the Israelites settled Canaan because, God told them to. God's giving the Promised Land to the Israelites. God paired it with his judgment on the Canaanites. When God first promised Abraham that his descendants would inhabit the Promised Land, he explained that this would happen after a period of slavery. And God says, it's not going to happen yet because the sin of the Amorites has not reached its fulfillment. God was holding off his judgment on the Amorites, or the people, just consider it the people of Canaan. He was holding off his judgment on them until the Israelites would enter the land. And then God was very, very serious about, when you get in there, you got to take them out. We'll get to more of that in a little bit. But that's Deuteronomy and Joshua. At the end of the book of Joshua, Joshua dies, and Joshua repeats those Canaanite prohibitions. Judges and Ruth takes up a bit of a longer period of time. And here's where I would point you to the dates of the judges on this insert. I made a change to the file. I meant to make a change to the file before I printed it, but I forgot to export it before I actually printed it. So the change I made was approximate dates of the judges. We have some precise numbers in here, but consider these to be approximations. The names that you see there are, in this column at least, they are all judges of Israel. Okay, so gives you kind of an idea of the flow. The book is episodic. It doesn't tell us everything that happened in Canaan or among the Israelites at that time. It gives us snapshots of things that happened to show us, its purpose is to show us this downward spiral of apostasy and deliverance and rest, and apostasy and deliverance and rest. So we're 8 books into the Bible, and we've really covered a lot of time, haven't we? So, brings us to almost 1000 BC. The Old Testament Bible history really takes us to about 400 BC. So there's the books, the historical books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and all the prophets that come after that preached during those times. Those really occupy that 500-600 year period from about 1000 to about 400 BC, and then we get to the New Testament when we get to AD. Okay, so that's the chronological context. Oh, here I have my, this is what it should say, approximate dates of the judges, make a mental note. Okay, let's start with what God tells us in Joshua about the conquest of the land. The Israelites come up from Egypt and they enter here by Jericho. And then they have a campaign where they take out the cities in the middle, and then they have a conquest south and a conquest north, and that's their strategy for taking the land. And God told the Israelites how they were to divide this up. Okay, so here's where Elena was helpful by giving us the 12 sons of Jacob. And I think that this is where Luke was going when he said 12 or 14-ish. So it's probably easier to look at your handout than it is to look at this. So if you remember all the ones that Lena said, are there any that are missing? Or are there any that are extra that weren't in her list that you notice? Levi, there's no tribal allotment for Levi in here. Anything else? Excuse me? Ephraim. Yeah, there is an Ephraim, and there wasn't an Ephraim mentioned when Lena did the list in such good order. Okay, he was the son of Joseph. Oh, so that brings up another one that's missing. There isn't a tribe of Joseph on here. Anything else? Gad. So we have Gad is right here. Gad and Asher were both sons of. Okay, so we have Levi and Joseph are missing, and then Manasseh and Ephraim are added. Here's why. According to the custom of the time, including the custom of the ancestors of Egypt, typically the firstborn son would receive a double portion of the inheritance. You may remember with Esau and Jacob that Esau was the firstborn, but Jacob stole his birthright and his blessing, and therefore he got double. Apparently because Joseph was the firstborn of Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel, he received a double portion, and that happened. That was the mechanism for that was that Joseph's two sons would each get a tribal allotment. So there is no Joseph up here in one sense, but in another sense, Joseph is up here twice because Joseph's portion is represented by Ephraim and Manasseh. That leaves us Levi. Why is Levi missing?
Priest.
Okay, the priests and the servants in the temple. So the Levites, they didn't have they didn't have land to farm and raise livestock on. Their full-time job was supporting the work of the temple. So a certain lineage within Levi, the sons of Aaron, they served as priests, and then the Levites served as helpers for the priests. And they were spread out in different towns throughout Israel, and then the goal was for them to go to Jerusalem to serve at the temple and have rotations in and out. So where would they get their livelihood? That's where the tithe came in, that the Israelites would give 10% of their income, their harvest, and then that would go to supply the Levites since they supported worship instead of farming and raising livestock and things like that. Okay? So this is what it was supposed to look like. I have some other things on here too. I have things like Amalek, Edom, Moab, Ammon, Aram, and Philistia. Those were usually enemy nations that still surrounded the promised land. So we would just want to be aware of them. I think that's one of the most helpful things. If you can kind of have an idea in your head when it mentions the Edomites or the Ammonites, or especially like the Philistines, since they're such big players, if you can kind of have an idea in your head of where they are, I think that helps the reading come to life when you read these accounts. So again, ideally, this is what it was supposed to look like. When Joshua died, the Israelites had a very strong foothold. It didn't quite look like this. They didn't have strong established possession of all these areas, but they had strong footholds, and the task was still all it was still like on schedule to be completed. The problem is the Israelites didn't complete it. So to flip over to the other side of the map, this is kind of approximately what the Israelite-controlled areas looked like during the time of the Judges. There were a lot of enemy peoples that were still living among them. It wasn't that the Israelites weren't able to push them out, it's that the Israelites refused to push them out. I want to emphasize here that these are very approximate borders. I borrowed them from a book. They were constantly changing because over a period of 400 years, you can imagine that in a very tribal area where there's a lot of conflict, that land is going to be gained, land is going to be lost, etc. So, for example, there was at least a short time when Jerusalem was under Israelite control, but that was lost. That's why Jerusalem isn't included in that. So, if you can, in your mind, kind of superimpose this map over this map, kind of get to know both of them. The way that the Israelites were distributed across the country was still kind of like this, where like Naphtalites still were up here, and Judahites and Simeonites were still down here. They were kind of approximately where they were supposed to be, but it was like a half-done job. Okay, so that is our geographical context of the book of Judges. Now I want to move on to those 3 big Canaanite prohibitions that God... Oh, one more thing I wanted to do. I like playing with the animations in PowerPoint. So look at that. Yeah, there's still one more. Maybe one more? Yeah, there. Here are some of the more prominent judges that the more words are spent on. You can see like the approximate parts of the country where they were active in. The book is very episodic. It's also very regional. When we learn about a judge, that judge like isn't coming to the deliverance of all of the people of Israel, but it's usually like a portion of the country that was under attack. Just the nature of the weaponry at the time and the geography, you don't see a whole lot of huge land grabs at one time. So, okay. So 3 Canaanite prohibitions. We're going to turn to the Bible now. We're going to read Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 1 through 9. So we're backing up again. Deuteronomy, 5th book of the Bible.
There's a question in the back.
Oh, question in the back? Where? Oh, Dad?
Just an observation, it was good that you had the scale of miles on there. I think we have a tendency, because when we look at Israel, it always takes up the whole map, but it's really tiny. It's like a third of the lower peninsula of Michigan. So there's a lot that happens there, and it's an important crossroads, but it's It's not big at all.
Yeah. I think recently I heard it compared to the size of New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
So you can see, and I think when I was a kid, my pastor taught me like about 70 miles top to bottom.
150 top to bottom and
Oh,
75
150.
across.
Oh, well, I didn't pay as good of attention as I should have. Okay, yeah, very, very good. And one reason I would like to go to Israel someday is just to see the topography. Out here, you have plains along the Mediterranean, which turn into foothills, which turns into 3,000-foot mountains around here. And then in the Jordan River Valley in the Dead Sea, you have like the lowest spots on Earth. Dead Sea is like 600 feet below sea level. There's a geographical and geological uniqueness to Israel as well. All right, where were we? We're at Deuteronomy chapter 7. This is Moses' long speech before the Israelites enter the promised land. You might recall that Moses didn't get to enter the promised land. He just got to see it from a distance. So this is when he waves goodbye to the Israelites and recounts for them their history up to this point and reminds them of God's laws, in which they would find great joy and blessing if they obeyed them. So what I have, 7, 1 through 9. Would there be like 2 volunteers that had breath in them to read loudly? I have a microphone that gives me an advantage. All right, Luke and Jesse, great. Okay, Luke, can you do verses 1 through 6?
Sure. When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess and drives out before you many nations, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, 7 nations larger and stronger than you, and when the Lord your God has delivered them over to you and you have defeated them, then you must destroy them totally. Make no treaty with them and show them no mercy. Do not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughters to their sons or make their daughters for your sons, for they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods, and the Lord's anger will burn against you and will quickly destroy you. This is what you are to do to them. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, cut down their Asherah poles, and burn their idols in the fire. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the face of the earth to be his people, his treasured possession.
All right, thank you. And before Jesse reads, I want to see if we can pick out like three big no-nos in the verses that Luke read. No intermarriage? No mercy? Okay, so, yeah.
Totally destroy.
No mercy. Like, kill them all.
Destroy foreign gods.
Yeah.
Destroy.
So, no treaties of any kind, no marriages of any kind, no gods of any kind. A lot of people will look at the Old Testament that want to discredit the Bible and say that the God that they see there is not a loving God at all. Because look at this genocide that they carry out. God said this destruction served at least 2 purposes. One of them was to keep his promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and give his people the promised land. The other reason was to bring judgment upon the godless, wicked people at the time. God accomplishes 2 big things with one fell swoop. So, this isn't the only time he says it. I just grabbed some of the more prominent times. Exodus 34. Joshua 23 is Joshua's parting sermon. The whole book of Judges illustrates what happened when the Israelites refused to do this. But there's tons of places in between too, and you just read through the first, all the books that precede this and follow it in the Old Testament. You have these repeated to the Israelites again and again. Here is where I would like to do an overview of the book by watching a Bible Project video. Anybody?
What
Oh.
does Jesse read?
Oh, Jesse, sorry. You were waiting patiently.
I figured I'm at the back of the room, I can project.
All right. Do verses 1 through 9.
7 through 9? Okay.
7 through 9. 7 through 9.
The Lord did not set his affection on you and choose you because you were more numerous than other peoples, for you were the fewest of all peoples, but it was because the Lord loved you and kept the oath he swore to your ancestors, that he brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the land of slavery, from the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know therefore that the Lord is God, your God is God. He is the faithful God, keeping his covenant of love to 1,000 generations of those who love him and keep his commandments.
Thank you. I chose and then forgot that I chose to read these verses too because God tells them what the difference is between them and these other nations that they were displacing. What was the difference? It wasn't that they were better. It wasn't that they were bigger. It wasn't because they were better behaved. It's really interesting the way that it phrases this. The Lord set his affection on you. And then if you just skip a couple words to the reason why, it was because the Lord loved you. The Lord loved you because he loved you. That's the Bible's answer of the reason why God has mercy on those on whom he has mercy. It's not because of anything in you. It's because of me. It's because I chose you. Now, I chose to include this part of the passage in here because I believe a central message of the book of Judges is that anything good is from God. The Israelites did not deserve any of this. Read through like the entire Old Testament from Abraham through Malachi, and the whole way along, every one of God's chosen people gives him every reason to give up on them. But God is faithful. Not because they were better, that's illustrated all the way through, but because he loved them and because he made a covenant with them. He made a promise. One hero in the Bible. And that one hero isn't the Israelites. The hero in our story isn't any one of us. The hero is God. Everything that he gives us is grace. We'll see so many reasons the Israelites gave him to give up on his covenant and stop loving them in the book of Judges, but God keeps on doing it, even if a whole lot of the Israelites suffer and are killed along the way. God will preserve a remnant of his people. Okay, thank you, Jesse, and thank you, Sarah, for reminding me of that. Okay, so Bible Project, does anybody remember these videos? We watched a fair number of them when we went through the whole Bible in 1 year. I think this overview of Judges is worth our 7 minutes. Hold on.
Before they had any kings, the tribes were all governed by these judges. Now don't think of a courtroom. These were regional, political, military leaders.
I got to change the screen. I'll rewind it.
And you need to be warned.
Let's see.
The book of Judges is very disturbing and violent. It tells the tragic tale of Israel's moral corruption, of its bad leadership, and basically how they become no different than the Canaanites. But this sad story is also meant to generate hope for the future. And you can see this in how the book's designed. There's a lot.
All right, here we go.
The book of Judges. So remember, after Joshua led the tribes of Israel into the promised land, he called them to be faithful to their covenant with God by obeying the commands of the Torah. And if they do this, they will show all the other nations what God is like. So Judges begins with the death of Joshua and basically tells the story of Israel's total failure. The book's name comes from the type of leaders Israel had in this period. Before they had any kings, sad story is also meant to generate hope for the future. And you can see this in how the book's designed. There's a large introduction that sets the stage for Israel's failure as they don't drive out the remaining Canaanites. Then the large main section of the book has stories about the growing corruption of Israel's judges. And the progression here shows how Israel's leaders go from pretty good to okay to bad to worse. The concluding section is really disturbing and shows the corruption of the people of Israel as a whole. So let's dive in and we can explore each part a bit more. The opening section begins with the tribes of Israel in their territories in the Promised Land. And while Joshua defeated some key Canaanite towns, there was still a lot of land to be taken and lots of Canaanites living in those areas. And so chapter 1 gives a long list of Canaanite groups and towns that Israel just failed to drive out from the land. Now, remember, the whole point of driving out the Canaanites was to avoid their moral corruption and their way of worshiping the gods through child sacrifice. God had called Israel to be a holy people, and that does not happen. Chapter 2 describes how Israel just moved in alongside the Canaanites and adopted all their cultural and religious practices. And it's right here that the story stops. For nearly a whole chapter, the narrator gives us an overview of everything that's about to happen in the body of the book. This part of Israel's history, the narrator says, was a series of cycles moving in a downward spiral. So Israel became like the Canaanites, and so they would sin against God. So God would allow them to be conquered and oppressed by the Canaanites. And eventually, the Israelites would see the error of their ways and repent. So God would raise up a deliverer, a judge from among Israel who would defeat the enemy and bring about an era of peace. But eventually, Israel would sin again, and it would all start over. This cycle provides the literary design and flow for the next main section of the book. It gets repeated for each of the 6 main judges whose stories are told here. Now, the stories of the first 3 judges, Othniel, Ehud, and Deborah, they are epic adventures. They're also extremely bloody stories. Either the judge themselves or people who helped the judge, they defeat their enemies and deliver the people of Israel. The stories about the next 3 judges are longer, and they focus in on the character flaws of the judges, which get increasingly worse. So Gideon, he begins pretty well. He's a coward of a man, but he eventually comes to trust that God can save Israel through him. And so he defeats a huge army of Midianites with only 300 men carrying torches and clay pots. But Gideon has a nasty temper, and he murders a bunch of fellow Israelites for not helping him in his battle. And then it all goes downhill from there. He makes an idol from the gold that he won in his battles. And then after he dies, all Israel worships the idol as a god, and the cycle begins again. The next main judge is Jephthah, who's something of a mafia thug living up in the hills. And when things get really bad for Israel, the elders come to him begging for his help. And Jephthah was a very effective leader. He won lots of battles against the Ammonites, but he was so unfamiliar with the God of Israel, he treats him like a Canaanite god. He vows to sacrifice his daughter if he wins the battle. This tragic story, it shows just how far Israel has fallen. They no longer know the character of their own God, which leads to murder and to false worship. The last judge, Samson, is by far the worst. His life began full of promise, but he has no regard for the God of Israel. He was promiscuous, violent, and arrogant. He did win brutally strategic victories over the Philistines, but only at the expense of his own integrity, and his life ends in a violent rush of mass murder. Now, a quick note here. You'll notice a repeated theme in the main section of the book, that at key moments, God's Spirit will empower each of these judges to accomplish these great acts of deliverance. Now, the fact that God uses these really screwed up people doesn't mean he endorses all or even any of their decisions. God is committed first and foremost to saving his people, but all he has to work with is these corrupt leaders. And so work with them he does. This whole section is designed to show just how bad things have gotten. You can't even tell the Israelites and the Canaanites apart anymore. And that's just the leaders. The final section shows Israel as a whole hitting bottom. There are 2 tragic stories here, and they are not for the faint of heart. They're structured by this key line that gets repeated 4 times at the close of the book. In In those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. The first story is about an Israelite named Micah, who builds a private temple to an idol. And that gets plundered by a private army sent from the tribe of Dan. So they come and they steal everything, and then they go and burn down the peaceful city of Laish and murder all of its inhabitants. It's a horrifying story. When Israel forgets its God, might makes right. The final story of the book is even worse. It's a shocking tale of sexual abuse and violence, which all leads to Israel's first civil war. It's very disturbing. And that's the point. These stories are meant to serve as a warning. Israel's descent into self-destruction is a result of turning away from the God who loves them and saved them out of slavery in Egypt. And now, Israel needs to be delivered again from themselves. The only glimmer of hope in this story is found in this repeated line in the last part of the book. It actually forms the last sentence of the story. Israel has no king. And so the stage is set for the following books to tell the origins of King David's family, the book of Ruth, and also the origins of kingship itself in Israel, the book of 1 Samuel. But the story of Judges has value as a tragedy. It's a sobering explanation of the human condition, and ultimately it points out the need for God's grace to send a king who will rescue his people. And that's the book of Judges.
And we are 2 minutes over time, so we'll close with a prayer, and then you can take these and tuck them into your Bible and refer to them as you read. Dear Father in heaven, use our study of the book of Judges to give us a sobering look at our own hearts and what we are capable of to guard and keep us from being entranced and tempted by the evil that is around us. Let us discern what is evil and what is right. When we err, we ask that you call us back to you through faith and repentance, that you forgive us our sins, and let us be not examples of tragedy, but examples of your grace and your light shining forth in the world. Amen. Thanks, everyone.